Thank you very much for having me here. I'm not used to talking microphones, so I never hear my voice that much. Anyway, beautiful grounds, and I hope you guys are having a good time today. So, my name is Romildo Votto. I work for a company called Turner & Townsend. I'm one of the directors in there. I'm also a lecturer for lecture risk management at the University of Adelaide. As you can see, I live in Adelaide. I'm actually from Brazil originally. Been in Australia for about 14 years now. Mechanical engineer, specialized in project management, project controls, and being for the last decade, being very focused on risk management. Basically, I had the risk management subject matter expert, basically, for Turner & Townsend in Australia or in the region. As a consultant, we tend to work in many different projects, and most of the projects that I work on, they are either like in aviation. I've done a lot of work in power and hydropower. Oil and gas mining is bread and butter, like we're doing those things all the time. And then a lot of rail type of projects. Just a little bit about myself, some qualifications, etc. in there. But yeah, look, I think what I'm trying to do here is just to demonstrate that we actually live and breathe, contingency management, risk management, and that's why I'm here to talk to you about this. I'm very excited about contingency management and risk management, actually. So I find actually the subject, some people find it very boring. I actually find quite interesting, quite exciting. So hopefully we finish here today and you get as excited as I am about contingency and contingency management. So when the conference invited me to present, they asked me to present on how and why to run down your contingency and methods to do this. And then basically, Turner & Townsend, we've been actually doing these type of presentations. We've been actually having discussions globally with a number of clients about how to do this, like how you do this. And then basically, what I want to talk to you today basically is what's wrong with holding a pot of money for use as when it's required? Over here we're using a UK term. They call it the QCRA. In Australia we tend to call QRA, and I'll explain a little bit what that is very shortly. And should we return contingency, like to the organization when we are not using it, or do we need to ask more contingency when we need it? So a lot of those questions, they are often asked by our clients and by many of the practitioners in the industry. So, and hopefully we can address some of those in here. So Turner & Townsend, we actually run a number of surveys throughout the year about many different things. And here is one that I brought to you, which is basically they asked us, are there any requirements or guidelines for capturing how contingency was used in your project? Basically, we're trying to get organizations to respond how they are doing in their projects. Just so you know, this has been recently done and was done for projects that were above $1 billion. Okay, so consider like major projects in the industry. And then very interesting to see that about 50% of the people, 50% of the organizations and projects that are people that responded to this said there was no requirement to capture how contingency is managed. Some said no data was captured at all, and some like the requirements were not there, but they were still like trying to get something done. Actually, only 50% of the projects, they actually have some requirements to be done. And then some are for the total contingency, and actually only 10%, about 10% actually was doing, how actually contingency was actually being used. And about 0, was doing this. And that is quite amazing. Like, it shocked me quite a lot. So what I would like to do here is actually put up a question to you guys. So if you could get your mobile phones, hopefully that's going to work. You're going to go into that site in here. So polev.com/Romildo Votto 259. Cool. So I think I'm just trying to get a little bit of understanding what happens in the industry. So this actually is exactly what I face every day with my clients. Everybody does a different thing. There is no standard way in the industry at the moment to do contingency management. Actually, my question now is, what is contingency? And then we start asking many different people this question, what is contingency for you, for you, for you? You're going to get different answers all the time. Because the term is such a known term in the industry. Everybody knows in the back of their mind what it is. You know that you need that. And we need to use that. And you're not authorized to use that, or you are. Some companies authorize you, some don't. Some have a very healthy contingency, some don't. Some people benchmark contingency. They say, 20% is too much. How do you know? It's a subject that is, in a way, is quite new to the industry. Actually, I've been in the industry for a few years now. And when I started my career in project management, actually contingency was actually kind of a bad term. Like projects didn't like to ask contingency. Projects would go, don't need contingency. I'm confident, I've been talking to clients, and that is a lot of people in the project management industry, they understand it. But projects that I work with, we work with that type of people that is called engineers. I'm one, I can talk about engineers. And a lot of times they say, no, don't need contingency. I've already, put everything in there. Everything is being assessed and analyzed. Don't worry, I'll be fine. And you don't know if actually, is he actually shooting himself in the foot, as in he won't have enough money or time or quantities in there in order to finish his activity, or has he allowed too much? Does he have a lot of thought into his estimating to his work? We don't know. And this is the stuff that I face actually all the time in the industry. So today, we're going to bring a few of those subjects. We're going to talk a little bit about some of those. I'm going to show you a few things that we've been doing. We've been working with clients, okay, to get to some sort of a standardization. I will talk about some practices, best practices, industry practices, but not standards. Make sense? So, and probably at the end, I'm just going to mention one initiative that has happened in the industry, which is the Risk Engineering Society from Engineers Australia has actually started developing what's called the Contingency Guideline, which is a really good startup, really good commencement of that. It talks a lot about how to get to contingency, but even that document does not tell you what contingency is. So it's quite interesting how new this subject is actually in the industry. All right. So two associations in the industry, well recognized in the industry, AACE, which is the Total Cost Management Society, basically is both of these organizations, they were US-based organizations. They talk about contingency as a pot of money, okay, used for in estimates. Some talk about time, some talk about cost, they talk about conditions, events, okay? But there's no word risk in there. So why we relate contingency to risks? Let's have a look. What is risk then? Okay? So when you look at risk, the definition of risk is very similar, isn't it? A condition on an event is in the future, may happen, may not happen. So it's actually, the definitions, they are extremely well aligned, although the associations, they actually don't specifically say, hey, this is a pocket of money that you need for risk events. Okay? So there is a relationship between contingency and risk and uncertainty. Okay? And I was looking at the schedule today. Probably there was 3 or 4 presentations. I think there is a concurrent one actually happening with this one, actually, talking about quantitative risk analysis, Monte Carlo, contingency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I decided that I'm not going to talk about that, okay? Because you had others talking about this. But I actually need to bring everybody into kind of a same level. So if contingency is very important for us and is related to risk, you know, in the beginning of our projects, I just use some phases in here, you know, identify, select, or feasibility studies, like typical names that we use in asset development. In the beginning of projects, in the early days of a project, is actually we don't know anything about the risks of the project. We just don't know. Like we have an idea, we have a concept, we might have done it before, so we have a lot of good information out there. So we actually might be able to bring this higher, but each project has individual specific risks. Yeah? And that's when actually we have the biggest risk exposure. I'm really surprised because I've got many estimates done at this phase, many, that people come and says, hey, I finished, quantify this, and add a 10%, and that's my estimate. It says, why 10%? Where did you take that number from? Like, that's the typical number we use. That's the benchmark, you know? I hear this a lot. That's the benchmark, you know, about my contingency. I don't like, because first I get asked all the time, you know, clients come to me and says, what is the typical contingency we use in this phase? And I says, okay, what's the typical fact that you put in your estimate first? How many opportunities do you have? How many risks do you have? Did you use, you know, when you estimated, was the engineer being very conservative? You know, like when he put like a slab of concrete, did he calculate it and said, was, I don't know, 20,000 cubic meters of concrete? Did he use that number, or did he put a factor of 40,000? Which pricing range did you get it from? Did you consider the highest cost of concrete or the lowest cost of concrete? Or you made the estimate to fit? All those questions will vary the amount of contingency that you have. So we cannot benchmark contingency. So please, from now on, if you take one topic out of today, from here today, is please don't try benchmark contingency. Try relating back to your risks and understanding, you know, how much contingency do you need, specifically for each project. So the less information that we have about risks, the more risk exposure we have. So if we're able to start learning about risks early in the project, as early as possible in our project, actually we start reducing that exposure, risk exposure, very quickly in our project. The other thing is, what I see a lot is actually quantitative risk analysis, multi-color simulation. We all do this. We all do this. Everybody, like there's 10 presentations today, as I said today, about this. There's a lot of people there doing this. Again, I'll go back to when I started my career, and it's about 20 years ago. And I remember I worked for an engineering firm, and there was I'm from Brazil, as I said before, and this company was in Brazil. About 2,000 people in this firm. And I remember there was this senior guy. He walked to the corridor, and everybody looked at the guy and said, "That is the planner. You see that guy? That's the planner. Going there." He used Primavera P3. Oh, brilliant, you know, DOS based, you know. It was amazing. And why? Oh, because he knows when we are going to finish the project. Such a beautiful discipline to have, isn't it? Nowadays, you know, with the advancement of software, Microsoft Project and Primavera and all that, the pricing actually is more affordable today. Everybody does planning, you know. But what happened within these 20 years, the profession actually degraded. Why? Because everybody could run the software, but not many people could plan. So you end up getting a lot of people with a schedule that was not achievable. So people start actually not trusting the schedule. And nowadays, we see that it's back in fashion, you know. But now we don't talk about, you know, everybody's a planner. We say, actually, there are planners and there are schedulers. You know, differentiating people that actually knows what they're doing to people that actually is just driving the software. Contingency risk management is exactly happening that now. A lot of people can run the software. You can go there and buy a license of, you know, At Risk, Primavera Risk Analysis, Acme Infuse, whatever software is out there, Crystal Ball. But putting the information in and getting a good result out, that is the challenge. The other thing is, we think that because we have a sophisticated tool, we can use it any time. And early in the project, we can't. Why? Because we don't have information. If you don't have enough information to put in a quantitative analysis, the analysis is not good. The tool is not going to solve this. Doing QRA, quantitative risk analysis, earlier, is not going to help your project. Okay? So how does this fit in, quantitative risk analysis? So what you're seeing here is basically the ISO 31000 model, okay? What I've done in here is actually I've taken the risk analysis and I said, look, risk analysis actually is divided into two. Into the qualitative approach and into the quantitative approach. So when we're talking about quantitative risk analysis, QRA, it's part of your holistic risk management process. How many of you have seen a QRA model that was totally not integrated or related to the risk register? Separate. How can that be if it's part of the one process? So QRA, quantitative risk analysis, yeah, there's a definition out there. Is what we're trying to get is a numerical estimate of the overall effect of the risk and uncertainties that we have. And we try to combine the effects of cost, schedule, and risk into one integrated analysis. So PMI, I'm just putting a model out there. It says that we get our risks analyzed. We examine the interrelationships between risk and cost, etc. Collect high quality risk data. So difficult to do this boxing here. We have to get our models, schedule, cost, etc. We build up the risk analysis. When it's probabilistic, we call Monte Carlo. And that's why we get the results. Beautiful. What are the results? And you've seen this before. Gives us the bell curve, with P50 and P90, which actually defines our contingency. Okay? So all this conversation now was to come to a point that says, hey, this is contingency for us. Is contingency P50? Is contingency P90? Is contingency P80? Is contingency 10%, 15%, 20%? It's not for me to say. Okay? There are organizations, a lot of the public organizations, they actually have a predefined, you're going to have P50, and then we need to put in the business case P90. I work with a lot of clients that they do one project. The organization is built around one project. What I tell them is actually, you need to get as much, P as you can, because if your project fails, if you go and ask for a P50 contingency, dude, you have only 50% chance of delivering this project. Probably it's a very low likelihood for a business that has one project. Maybe you need to go and seek a P80 contingency or P90 contingency in that case in order to make sure that you're very confident that we are going to deliver this project. Companies that they run many projects, they tend to have this P50 scenario because half of the projects are going to go over, half of the projects are going to go under, and holistically from a portfolio point of view, from a program management point of view, you actually can deliver well. So now I start bringing the concept of program and projects. So a lot of the consideration nowadays about contingency in the industry, they start talking about contingency not managed only by the project side, but managed also by the program or the portfolio level. Actually, instead of one project getting the advantage of having good contingency or risks did not occur, so they end up with a big pot of money, actually return that to the portfolio, to the program, and make sure that other projects take the benefit of using that contingency. A lot of organizations, end of the year, you get the budget resets, and people say, we need to spend that money in my project, otherwise next year they're not going to give me money again. And then what ends up happening is actually projects that they were wealthy in their contingency, they end up using contingency with no value adding. They start utilizing contingency, like spending the money, but not add value into the project. Where the next project, which actually a couple of risks occurred and all that, they're actually running out of contingency. They're actually reducing their scope sometimes, reducing value to the project because they didn't have money in there. They are doing value engineering type of things. So actually managing contingency on a program management type of level is actually quite good. This is a model. Another reason that I don't like benchmarking contingency is because contingency is very much related to time. Cost is very much related to time. And when you estimate, usually when we estimate, we try estimating here, what a normal project looks like, with a typical time delivery. However, if your project is actually longer than it should be or shorter than it should be, you end up costing more. Actually, this curve is just theoretically because on this side in here is almost continuous and keeps growing, where actually on this side in here, it ends up to a point that you cannot shorter the project anymore. And you can put as much money as you want on that project, you're not gonna be able to shorten the project. Okay, now we got contingency, your P50, your P90, your P80, whatever you want. How does that fit in? Goes into your estimate. Yeah? So basically, we estimate our direct costs, indirect costs, owner's costs, etc. And then a lot of organizations, they start calling contingency the P50. So I'm naming here P50 as contingency. Typically, that expected cost, target cost, is actually the money that the project manager has to deliver. So it's the bucket of money that stays with the project to deliver. On the side, there is still management reserve, which is for extraordinary risks out there. And then sometimes called the P90. I've seen the P80 now. I've seen the P75. I've seen the P85. I've seen quite a few different ones. And then typically in owners' organizations, we talk a lot about escalation, which gives the total outturn cost. Beautiful. So we now have contingency at the built up in the estimate. So I'm putting a little model out there. That's how I see risk. So risk is in the future. Risk may happen, might happen, could happen. So there's always, when we're talking about risk, there's always likelihood. So you're always going to use a likelihood type of word to describe a risk. That risk could occur, may occur. If you say something will occur, it's not a risk. Yeah? And if you say, actually when we say that risk has occurred, it's actually not talking about a risk anymore. You're talking about an issue. Okay? So it's actually the risk. The difference between a risk and an issue is actually the issue has occurred, is a risk that has occurred. So it's interesting because when you look at projects that they had a good risk register, you see that transitioning happening. You see people can track issues, can track changes. And you see a lot of projects that they don't know what hit them. When you go back and look at the risk register, you see that the risk register actually was just a tick box exercise that was put in the project, and nobody ever looked at that, and that's why they lost control of the project. Point is, risk issue becomes a change. Yeah, makes sense? So if a risk becomes a change, we need change register. We need the change register. We need to do a change management into our project to make sure that we're capturing all the changes with tracking, forecasting, and so forth. That's how you manage contingency. Same thing. So contingency is managed via change management. Simple as that. You need contingency? Yeah, you do change management. Get the money from contingency, and then you use that. Okay? So the question is, it? Yeah? It's contingency to be used. Yeah? Everybody agrees. So we put a contingency in our project. We're going to spend the money. It depends. You may, you can, you could, yeah. Has the likelihood already there. You might not need it. And if you don't need it, we got to return. Okay? That's always the rule. Yes? Yes? Everybody put their hand up. If someone doesn't agree with this statement, put their hand up. You've seen both? Yeah. You don't agree? Contingency doesn't belong to the... Say again? I agree with politicians. Okay. It is. Apart from his politicians. You see, and the reason for that is actually people don't understand. Okay? But budget and estimate is only completed when you have contingency. Yeah? Okay, so your budget includes contingency.
I think so, yes, but you have clients that say we'll hold it, and you must request it.
You still need to request it via the change management, and that's how mature the change management process is within the project, and of course, like how you we deal with the clients and all that. What actually seen, the more people do not give contingency, the more contingency is hidden, in fact, into the estimate, and the less management you can do on the contingency. It's actually it's the other way around. If the contingency is clear, is there to be used, to be managed, you can access this. Fantastic. So, if budget cost, we have a control account called contingency that we have in our budget. Guess what? For a schedule, we need to have the bucket, the control account in our schedule to manage contingency as well. So a lot of people, I see, they take the contingency and they start putting within each activity. Okay, they just spread contingency. Okay, it's very normal, very common. What's the problem with that? And in my mind, I typically tell my clients, I say, you're already planning to be late. Okay? So imagine a little program I have, I don't know, engineering, procurement, and construction. And 3 months, 3 months, 3 months, and then I have 3 months contingency. Okay? So 12 months. If you say, oh, I don't want to see contingency, I know it's going to take 12 months. What do you do? Engineering 4 months, procurement 4 months, construction 4 months. Yeah? Then now the engineer, how long does he have to finish the engineering? You're the procurement manager. When do you need the equipment on site? Month 8, not month 6. So it's actually already consumed 2 months of your contingency even before you hit construction by not managing your contingency. So how you draw down from contingency, okay? That's the next question. So there are several methods for doing this. You draw down what you need, when you need it. It happens. Some people totally allocate per phases. Some organizations, they have a direct link, a drawdown. A lot of organizations now, they're actually linking risks to the contingency drawdown, which is pretty good, which comes back to the question that we had in the beginning. And we started seeing a lot. We started using Monte Carlo QRA actually as the project evolves. So there's quite a few different techniques happening at the moment. Tracking is better than not tracking. Usually that's the important one in that. So in the past, I brought this because I've seen this in a conference about 12 years ago. And then they were talking about contingency management. So imagine that this is the total contingency that you have. And then you draw down from contingency. And then, so what they're saying is actually you can draw down, in this case in here, I don't know, up to 30%. Your project is okay. And then if you, And then if you draw down 50%, you got to go and recover your contingency now. Go back, try to get contingency back. Actually, this is dated. We don't use these things anymore. Okay? Because what we agreed before, contingency is there to be used. So what's going to be your contingency at the end of your project? So actually recovering contingency, you don't need it. If you are managing your contingency properly, you actually don't need it. So what we started doing, this is a true project, okay, guys? As you can see, we were working around early 13, late 12 in here. Went there, did a quantitative risk analysis on a feasibility study. Project comes with $700 million of contingency. This project both was on the billions, okay, of course. Contingency considered too high. Company says, why you need so much contingency? So what we're trying to explain here is actually we did a drawdown of the contingencies. Actually, we say we're going to use the 700. And we're gonna use, throughout the life of the project, which is about 5 years long, the project. We might use, we can use. The important thing is we have it in there. If risks occur, we have it there to be used. Some of the contingencies is related to risk events. Some of the contingency was coming from the possible schedule variabilities. And some of the contingency was coming from the variability of the scope itself that was undefined, undefinitions on the scope itself, on the quants and pricing structures that you had in there. Yeah? So my conversation with the client started becoming different because I said, look, if you want to really control your contingency, there's actually 3 or 4 risks in your project that we are gonna find out in the next 6 months. That risk will occur or will not occur. And then if it doesn't occur, actually, I think was about only those risks were about $200 million in there. It says by that time, in 6 months' time, we might only need $500 million in contingency. We can actually return $200 million by then. That's all. You're going to return contingency. Yeah. If those risks doesn't occur in 6 months, it was about water approvals and etc. Says we will know. We'll have the approvals. We will know if we have the water. We might have used the 200 by then, because the risk might have eventuated, but the risk might not eventuate, so we can return the 200. Oh, great! So you start having them. Is a very different conversation now. Going back to if you're here, halfway through your project, and you have half of your contingency left, 50% of your contingency left. According to this, I'm okay. I don't need to, oh my God, I need to bring back my contingency levels to the 700 again. Make sense what I'm trying to say? Yeah? So if you can see, you can manage. Okay? So the technique that we've been using a lot nowadays is doing this. Is actually forecasting, is a plan for how you're going to spend contingency. I know this one looks quite nice, but actually you schedule. The risk registers, when the risk is not going to occur anymore, so you know that the risk is going to cease. Let's say a risk that was in procurement, when the procurement is over, you don't have procurement risks anymore. So you know that you won't need that money anymore, or you might have used that money by then, but you can start tracking this. Make sense? So another example that you can, just showing the same. I showed how you got there. Now it's just a little line in there. So now you see this happening. What time I finish? It's now. What time is 5 minutes? Is that it? No? Okay. So people, you can start seeing like the use of contingency. You might be under, you might be over. Okay. What we've been seeing now is the QRA technique being used in contingency. So actually, I've just done one of those last month. So project is underway. We use some of contingency. The question is now, how likely are we to get there? Are we still 80% confident in our project? And the answer is, oh no, you're only 70% confident that you're going to finish your project with the money that you have. Oh, great. Oh, you only have 60% confidence. So we started using, instead of like saying, I need more money, you start talking about levels of confidence halfway through your project. But you need to know, you need to track contingency. Now you combine that graph with your risk exposure, you can start looking at this. If I have more risk than I have contingency, I have more risk than I have contingency, I'm exposed. If I have more contingency than I have risk, I have some reserve in there. You might be thinking about, hey, I can return now, but you can see it. So what I'm proposing is actually to be able to see it. This is an example that I encountered in one of my clients where it was a program of works, about 7 projects happening in parallel, and we needed to finish the 7 of them in order to get gas flowing from A to B. And all the budgets that I had to control, I didn't know if they had built contingency or not in the project. There's contingency here. People would say, oh, there is. How much? I don't know. So how can I control this now? So what I've done actually, I said, you know what? At least I know your exposure. So we start tracking how exposed you are to, in terms of cost to your project. So I start informing the management and says, you know what? Your project, I don't know, it's $40 million. And in December, we had a potential $7 million blowout. It could happen with the risks that we had. Oh, but do you have contingency? Nobody can tell me if you have contingency. So worst case scenario, let's assume you don't, you have a $7 million problem. See, like the owner at least could see that we're tracking, how much risk exposed they were. And we kept tracking that. And in February, the problem, a lot of the risks did not occur and all that. Now it's only $1 million problems that you have. And we still can forecast that. Always keep forecasting that. And we've done that all via quantitative risk analysis. Final thing, what are we looking at now? So we've been talking about risk-based estimating for a long time now, quantitative risk analysis to come up with your contingency, your P50 numbers and so forth. Now we're talking about risk-based project controls, which is what we've been talking now, controlling, doing project controls with always looking into the risks to make sure that a contingency is managed. What we have to start doing now as well is actually making sure that we are doing earned value, risk-based earned value. Because at the moment, people don't know, probably a topic for next presentation next year, what the PMB is. Where's the PMB? The performance measurement baseline. I'll leave you with that question. Thank you.